I'll hope to maybe sort of change up the speed here a little bit. I got invited to speak about like my experiences building sales enablement functions from the ground up, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Sit here and tell all my peers like how to build a sales enablement function? Didn't feel like right to me and my style, but I think that there have been over the last 20 years some learnings, and I think for my personal journey, I've almost like simplified a lot of like how I prioritize what to do and how to get everybody bought into my enablement programs. And that simplification is I'm going to distill down into 3 things that have really worked for me. So I'm going to just tell you this is like what has worked for me, and if any of this, resonates with you, it's not going to be about how to design a specific instructional design program or an onboarding program. It is a little bit more higher on like theoretically, how do I approach a lot of these big things, and why does it work for me? So it doesn't even matter really. Some of these tips, if you are that first person, it is a unique position to be in, and maybe at some point you will be, but I've worked like you in large companies as well. But anytime you're the primary, you have a reputation and you have your work. And those two are kind of actually secretly being monitored all the time. And at least they were for me. And it took me a long time to figure out that there was like all these little hidden tests along the way being an enablement lead, right? Because you're sort of in the middle of everything. So let me just jump right in. What formed my opinion about all of this is I started 20 years ago. So I've been doing this for 20 years. And I have run the gamut from very, very large companies, always in tech, to Netlify now, which is a pre-IPO startup. So in 2013, I made my first big jump to working for smaller companies. And I loved it. And if you look at my LinkedIn page, you see really very few like recommendations, quotes about how great Todd was from those early days when I was a cog in a wheel. But something I did and something about my style maybe even really helped me as I moved into these smaller companies and helped them grow. And for me, what clicked was connecting this all to trust. You get squeezed between product marketing and you get squeezed between executives and even different executives that don't necessarily agree with one another. And, building enablement for me is about building trust because that smooths everything out in front of me. So when I'm sort of thinking about establishing myself in a new company and getting started and building an enablement reputation or function, I'll do the 3 things that I mention here. And I don't think I'll ever go back to working for a large company again. For the reasons, thank God there are the presenter that was here before Dell. I mean, I would need that because I'm not a process guy. So the 3 things that have really worked for me is having confidence in a foundation that I bring to every company. I'm going to share with you what I use as my foundation and how I use it in the first maybe 60 days. What I've learned about bringing my own personality to enablement and what that unlocks for me rather than sort of hiding behind my work. And then the third is the value of branding, which is the thing that I've learned most recently. And again, my disclaimer is that none of these are like tips that you need to even write down. They should just sit back and see if you agree with these things. And if not, let's talk about it because I can probably learn as much from you guys as you from my experiences. So the first one is know what your foundation is for a fast impact, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe a fancy way of saying when you're starting a function like this or when you're reestablishing it, you have this hey, I got to go out and listen and find out what this company's culture is about, what the sales leader's priorities are about, and I've got to do a listening tour. But actually you have to do that plus get an early win or 2 going. And so you can't go, I haven't been able to go, and I feel like I'm yelling, sorry. I feel like I can't go and just be tell me what you need. I actually lose this secret test that I don't know is being tested against me if I just do that. So I have this foundation. This is what's worked for me. You probably have your own, but I focus it not on specific things, but on, I don't know what the right word for it is, but like the end result. So obviously we all need to figure out how to make onboarding work if it isn't already working in your company. I call the one on the bottom the one source of truth, whether it's the content management system or something like that, but there has got to be a place where everybody knows to go to find the trusted content they need to run their sales organization, especially when you're in a small company, right? Streamlining the information flow to sales. We all know we are the protector of the bombardment of stuff that comes at them. And getting my arms around that is something that I evangelize. Then I move into like the documenting of best practices, right? So who's doing what well and how has that been documented, and putting that all into a playbook, start to build a methodology, all these things. So the other two, role-specific enablement, sales skills, those things come usually a little bit later. And none of this should be a surprise as much as what I try to do with this is I use it as my interview guide almost. So, hey, I'm sitting down with the head of account management today. Tell me what you know. And they won't even know in a smaller company, or if they've never really had a functioning good sales enablement person, they won't even know what is broken in their mind or not. And they can spin out over here and spin out over there. So I'll listen, tell me what you think your team needs the most of, blah, 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 blah. But then I actually kind of like poke the bear by going through some of these things. And then they start to say, oh, well, Todd kind of knows his stuff. I didn't even think about that. And so anyways, it's a great strategy that has worked for me because I need to find out where my priorities are and start to get a quick win. I have, in my opinion, in my experiences, probably 60 days to deliver something pretty darn good. And I have to get started. I can't wait 30 days to do all my interviews. So for each of the last 3 companies, the small companies that I built this on, it starts in different areas, right? Every company is different. And for me, with Netlify recently, it was like, that was my CRO's priority. We need to get all this down because the sales stuff, each sales rep is managing a sale differently. And that's because the content was all over the place. Nobody knew where to go for anything. But the point is, I haven't even broached metrics yet. And I took 4 years off of enablement, thought I would never come back when I was at Zendesk. And then I did. And I thought, oh shit, maybe I need to come back and I'm going to start with being like, I'm a metrics only guy and I'm going to only, focus on enabling, speed of the sale and time to first, quota, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought that actually doesn't work. Because you do need to build a foundation and make sure that the foundation is running. So this gives me the map I go to, and anything that's around this is I kind of put as noise where I can potentially address it, but I can also say, no, I'm not going to do that. And that took me a long time to find my voice to be able to do that, which, as we all know, is one of the big trappings, I think, of sales enablement is all the requests you get. Okay, so tip number 2 is a little bit of a departure, and I'll kind of address this as a story. So when I was at EMC, my boss, I learned a lot from her over 7 years, and one of the things that I realized is she did a great job managing up and not a great job managing down. So her team we were constantly like, build this report and run over here and do this, and it was hard all the time to live like that. But I actually watched her and why was she so successful? I mean, the sales leadership thought she walked on water, and I just wanted to scream at them and be like, no, she's killing her employees. But it taught me a valuable lesson. She became somebody that they wanted to work with, that they could trust. Whether or not they saw how the sausage was being made underneath, she put emphasis there. And I'm not here to say that's the advice to give, but I said, I'm gonna take something from this. Because I do believe that when you have relationship-based leadership, sales people, they are constantly looking for, are you a type of person they want to work with? And I was kind of like hey, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to do, good work. And this learning program was designed really well, and they didn't fucking care. So it was the people I saw that were like, you know, they knew how to relate to them. They knew how to bring their personality from them. They knew how to get salespeople to warm up to them and trust them. Saw a lot more success. The road was easier for them. And I realized, hey, that's what we are. We are somebody that they need to trust in, that they can learn the product quickly so they can get selling, that they can deal with this product launch well, whatever that is. Trust is a big underlying thing that I don't know gets talked about quite a bit, but it is something I advise all of you to figure out what that looks like for you. So when I started a company, I try to figure out, like, well, what is my voice going to be? And so I actually try to think a lot about this because I never really wrote it down. So for me, here's how I go about it, in case any of this works for you. First, diagnose the sales leader. I've had two major buckets. There's the ego, right? So this is my current CRO who brought me to Netlify and was my CRO at Zendesk, and he's an ego. Like, I mean, the guy's just like, I want fireworks at the kickoff. You know, I want to, you know, he's always got ideas, right? They're the sales leaders that are like, they kind of think they can tell you how to do your job. And you got to placate them. You can't fight them. And then you have the empowerment sales leaders, which are fewer and far between. Norm replaced this sales leader at Zendesk, and my current CRO, Z, is like this. And they are the ones that say, Todd, you know, you're the expert. Like, tell me what we need to do. And so you got to go around and figure out of the most important leaders, for me, I try to diagnose that. Who are they? Are they an ego person? Because then I move into what I call thoughtful supporter. Wow, that's a great idea, you know. Well, how about we think about it in this way, like apply my expertise to the idea that they've already come up with rather than trying to shut down their idea. So manipulation, basically. Entrepreneur is how I deal with the empowerment ones, who are great leaders and who secretly have this expectation of you, get it done. Right? Get something done. So then I go back to that map that I had, and I'm like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to start to produce. If you don't tell me, if you just want me to start doing these things. And one time I got this really wrong, right? So we had a new head of sales for North America at Zendesk, and I was feeling real egotistical and not happy that, you know, some change. So anyways, she came to me on her first week because they were going to do an all hands, and it was our first presentation to the entire sales force. And she said, I'd love to share with you what I'm going to present. And I was like, okay. You know, didn't even like sort of stand up. She just came to my desk, and she goes through the slides, and I'm like she's saying that discovery was important part of being in sales. And I just responded to her and said, and I thought she wanted my opinion. She didn't. So I said, I think this stuff is too basic. Like, you know, we already covered this stuff. You may not have known last year, but like, you know, you got to think about like what's new. And she basically told me that she thought I was rude and that I was passive aggressive in the way that I delivered that message. And my relationship with her for the next year was done. And she back-channeled. She stood up a methodology underneath my own sales methodology program. And it caused me to basically quit. So diagnosing and understanding your sales leader and trying to build that rapport was a big lesson for me on make it or break it, right? And I don't care how good of an onboarding program you build, if you don't have the support for people, if you're not putting that emphasis on that, like, hit pause for a second, okay? Third was don't ask, just start doing it. And of course, this works in smaller companies when you're in building mode. But I don't know, I'm just like, we didn't know at Netlify that we needed to get control of Slack for our salespeople. And I said, I just posted one day. I said, I've been going around the company and here's all this stuff and we're going to get this, every week you're going to get this Slack spoon-fed thing. And next thing you know, people are like, oh my God, I love that you're doing that. Da, 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 da. So my point here is you don't have to always just wait for permission for everything. And I feel like when I worked in a larger company, it was like, do I have somebody that's like kind of sponsoring that's going to take the heat for this? Like, sometimes they really like it, even if it's a small thing when you take an initiative on it. And then be authentic. I mean, the world was very different 20 years ago. But like I'm really happy now that I feel like a lot of people can really bring a more authentic version of yourself to that. But people, especially sales reps, are looking for that. So whomever you are, introverted, extroverted, whether you have a lot of humor in your life or you're just kind of a quick hit kind of person, you gotta bring that to your thing. And I have a lovely story that I tell. I hired this guy when I was at Zendesk, and he was a real gregarious person, and people liked him, but quality of work was struggling, and just wasn't project managey. And anyway, so we were struggling assigning with things. And so we said, why don't you take over the weekly webinar, right, to the sales force? It's something in my 20 years I've just hated, right? I just don't, like hosting the weekly webinar. Anyways, I thought maybe his personality would work. And so he was an ex-ESPN sportscaster, radio sportscaster. And I didn't really think about that, but so I get on the first webinar that he's hosting. And he cues up this music, and then he goes into a WWF, and now next up is gonna be, and I was like, I put my head in my hands on my desk, and I was like, this is gonna be a fucking disaster. What are my European colleagues gonna think of this guy who's so American, so yeah, blah, 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 and I thought, fuck this up again. And so, he goes through this, but the response was amazing. And people started chattering about it. They're like, oh my God, it brought back life to this program, this webinar. I mean, the Europeans would go up to him at Sales Kickoff and be like, I gotta meet, who's Adrian on your team? I've gotta meet him. And I had to swallow my entire thinking about this, because it was just I'm just gonna be so real to who I am and so contagious. And that program took off. And so not all of us can do that, and that's not the point, but there is some level of realness that we all should bring to the work, some level of humor, what I call enjoyability, right? Nobody wants to go, you all go to training programs as well. Nobody wants the boring security training, right? So make it enjoyable. These are all the things that you've heard from smarter presenters than me. I try to do the same things, but I take that framework and then I say, cool, onboarding is going to be, some competitions. We're going to actually get your hands on a keyboard. We're going to change your first impression of what it's like to join a company and not sit there and listen to a bunch of slides. We're going to put humor into the information flow. Okay, so this product marketing launch is boring as heck, and I'm going to try to synthesize it into something more enjoyable. So I go through all this, and I just try to layer this because I want everybody, including myself, to enjoy the programs that I build. And I know if I do, two things will happen. One, attendance and participation will go up. But more importantly, I'll get the right feedback of what I'm doing wrong. So you need them to trust you, and so you'll start to get the feedback. I've been in so many training programs where they're like, that was great. And maybe they fill out a CSAT survey, blah, blah, blah. So layering in enjoyability to my framework helps me then really sort of build this out. And then the third tip I think I learned probably most recently is the value of branding. I don't know why it took me so long, but I was in a meeting where I was basically sitting in the back of the room, and the executives were all there. It was all the way up to the CEO of Zendesk, and I think it was because we were doing a big kickoff thing. But anyways, the conversation went sideways, and some of the other executives started asking the CRO, well, blah, 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 well, how are we addressing this kind of thing? What is enablement really doing about this or doing about that? And all the speaking points that you prepare for them, all the meetings that you've had with them, go out the fucking window. What did he remember? The names of a few programs which were or were not necessarily relevant to the question being asked. And I had this aha moment. I needed to give them a single word to describe something large. Because as much as we spend time selling up to these sales leaders, What happens beyond them needs to be simple. So when they talk to themselves, they need to know, okay, well, enablement's got this and this and this. And so I label all these programs and I hit it over and over and over again until I get this. So we are called the money organization at Netlify, not a sales organization. That's our cute little term. So my weekly roundups for them is called On the Money. It's not rocket scientist. But oh my God, if they don't gravitate to that, and they talk about it, and they label it that, and that one word now means an entire set of work that I've just summarized in an easy way for them, and it works for me. So I've got the things that I need to build, I make them enjoyable, and I brand the heck out of them. And that gives me this really nice foundation that I wish I would have known 20 years ago. And I didn't, anyway, so I hope some of this is just like, I've heard this before, but yeah, you're right. I could see myself doing that more. And this goes back to you just got to do it. You don't have to wait for permission. Take some risks, because you will be like that branded program, like people talked about it. People remember when we're at the kickoffs or the all hands meetings and da-da-da-da. So it's really worked for me, and I encourage you to do that. Here's some very not so sexy, because I work for a small company and I don't have a team, of things that I've done just to try to put some branding and some humor into some of those things, and I'm too embarrassed to have you guys read this, and so I'm going to skip. But now I have, and this is where I'm at, like right now. I've been at Netlify for 6 months. So I have built these foundation. People trust in the programs that I've built, and I can now really start to say, hey, Mr. CRO, what enablement's really about, where it's really going to get you value, is helping you with the metrics that you're struggling with. Building the pipeline you need, right? Speed of the average sale, we're losing too many deals to one of our competitors. How can enablement help that? I could not go directly to that and be like, I'm going to build this thing again, because I didn't have the trust. So I take all this, and then I say, let's show you how I do this, and how we can start to then map the right, metrics, KPIs to this. And I, like you, I'm not going to take credit for time to ramp quota. I'm going to say, what do I do to help say that this is not an enablement problem? So I have a love-hate relationship with metrics. I think anybody who stands up here and tells you, like, enablement's got to be all about metrics, probably, in my experience, is over-rotating. Like, it's really important to getting headcount and all these things like that. Don't get me wrong. But it's no sales leader that I've worked with across those 6 companies has been like, you own that. There's some level of like, yes, thank you, Rebecca, for coming to me with that you have impacted this metric, but quietly they're like, well, so has, blah, blah, blah. So, keep that, sort of fair frame of mind. But I think that this then allows you the runway to start to build from there. And that's kind of like my journey, and I will sort of keep repeating this until it doesn't work. But I welcome other people's thoughts, experiences, and stuff like that, because that's all I have.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions, and who would like to ask Todd a question? We've got.
Start. What's going on, man? Hey, nice hat, by the way. Hi, Todd. Great presentation, first of all. Agree with pretty much all of that. I'm curious about the situation that you had with the person that initially reacted poorly to your feedback. I'm kind of shocked and appalled that it ruined that relationship for the next year. So what I'd like to ask you is, what did attempts to remedy that relationship look like going forward, and why do you think it didn't work? What was her role?
It takes two to tango, right? So it was much about her reaction to my, gruffness, right? So there's, I don't take ownership for everything. Like, a different sales leader might not have taken that so personally. But the way that I tried to deal with that was I had built up a pretty good reputation already. And the hard part is, in a sales organization over the years, people come and go. right? Your allies who would have defended you are gone, right? And so but she had a few people in her direct report team that I was like, hey, you need to let her know, like, while I might have pooped the bed on that one, like, there are other things that I'm doing and da-da-da. And I use sort of adjacent relationships to try to earn that way back. This person was just going to need time, and they were going to need like slow proof points. By the time I left, and frankly, once I left, I stayed at Zendesk, but I took a different role outside of sales and sales enablement. And then it was like, oh, we wish you were back. I mean, it was like, it was kind of like fake. But we would now be on good terms because I think we both kind of learned from each other. But it was, for me, the learning was listen before you just start to share your opinion, because you just have to really, the enablement function has to subserve in some ways to the sales leadership function. And I hate that because I have my own ego. And but it's something I have to do every time now, is figure out who they are and then adapt appropriately. Did that kind of answer your question? It took a while, but it took a year. It took reputation building and just some conversations, and then slowly over time, she just started to say, okay, I'm on board.
More than answered. I got 3 tips and a key takeaway, so thank you.
Oh.
Beautiful. Okay, we have one question over here.
As somebody who is the first sales enablement hire, and I've already kind of started, what would your advice be on someone who's started an approach to bringing this to the table, but almost restarting, almost like not the thought process of the last 2 months never happened, but almost restarting this introduction process of establishing that enablement program. From kind of a similar system of what you've brought to the table to new programs.
So there's a question, I've done this for 2 months, but now I want to kind of like hit the reset button?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess for me, like hat in hand, one, if there was like something that caused to want to reset, whether it was something like you're like, we started this strategy, but I don't think it's the right one. Like, again, everything for me comes down to my relationships. So I can hit the reset button if Z and I are in a good place, and I can say, oops, actually I think, we should reprioritize that. But we all make like little, mistakes, or it wasn't implemented right, or like the Dell said before, like you have V1.1, right? But on the side, you're using your personal credibility, the way you communicate it, to sort of earn your way to have those little wiggle room. So I don't really know how to answer that question. I mean, but I would say like, if you can come in with something that's like a more concrete, okay, but here's specifically what I'm going to do now. It's this time frame. Like you give them the confidence to be like, okay, this looks real, looks attainable, has a plan, seems organized, is charming about it, humble about it, all those things. You might get the traction you want.